Imagine this. You wake up, and before you've even had your coffee, your AI copilot has already cleared low-value meetings, created a summary for your board deck, rerouted a Sev1 escalation to the right team, and filed an expense report you forgot about. All without you opening a single app. The fact is, AI and copilots are quietly becoming the control center of all of our digital lives. No longer just cute helpers. In super apps, they're not just answering questions, they're building their own apps. They're gluing together workflows and they're taking action across tools. We used to talk about there's an app for that. Well, now we're saying there's an agent for that. In today's episode of Beyond the High T headlines, we're not talking about any one vendor. We're talking about the seismic shift as AI copilots become the new operating system for work. Hopefully by the end of today, you know how to tell the difference between a chatbot and a true autonomous copilot, autonomous agent. You'll be able to talk about what shift is actually happening for the teams on the ground and what CIOs should do now so they design this future rather than have it happen to them. I'm your host, Shawn Rosemarin. It's my absolute pleasure today to bring one of my favorite guests, Jeff Margolese, Senior Vice President of Solutions Engineering at ServiceNow. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Shawn, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you again. It's been a good decade since we actually worked together directly, but always good to see you doing great at Pure.
Yeah, and for our listening audience, Jeff is a original Canadian. I'm a Canadian, so we're going to call this the Canadian episode, but don't let that scare you away. We both have extensive experience. Jeff, why don't we get going? You know, I talked a little earlier in the intro about, these are no longer cute helpers. And I think when people think of agents and they think of co-pilots, and we'll get into the discussion a little more, I can't help but think about Clippy.
You're showing your age on that one with Clippy. Even I had to think about that for a sec. The little paper clip that used to be annoying on top of Word way back when. Huh?
Yeah, that didn't really do anything or do anything helpful, but it was kind of cute. I'd like to say at some point someone's going to say that was the first instantiation of AI into an application, but we all know, along with Microsoft Bob, it didn't quite make it. On a serious note, though, I mean, look, being at ServiceNow, working with customers in this space, really being focused on the optimization of workloads and workflows, what's the most jaw-dropping thing you've seen these assistants, these agents really start to do in the real world? Something that has made you think, okay, this actually changes the game.
Yeah, I mean, even beyond, I'll call it the ServiceNow platform for a minute. I'm sure we'll chat in and around that as we go on. So we'll steer clear there for a second. What I see has been just incredible lately. It's actually been more near and dear to what you and I have done for a living for a long period of time. If you think about what we do as solution consultants or sales engineers, hey, what's the customer's problem? We go and figure out what to do with that. We might go create some demo. We come back, we show it, and then hopefully they buy the software. We might attach some value to it. Nowadays, let's see, I can use Notebook LLM inside of any of these meetings. It records everything, extracts out all of these use cases. I can then pump that directly into something like Miro as an example. I can go and create my little flow in there, click, hit AI, and guess what it starts to do? It can now start coding directly in platforms like ServiceNow and many others using some of the vibe coding based capabilities that are sitting out there. And I go like, wow, look at all that stuff. I mean, that would have taken me a lot of paper, pen, PowerPoint, and a whole bunch of coding just to make that happen. And nowadays you have these unbelievable tools that can really save time and make it just a fantastic experience.
So I can't help but think as you talk about this, I mean, look, as humans, we've driven all sorts of productivity. If I skip past the invention of fire and, skip past the Industrial Revolution, we went into calculators. Well, that helped humans do their job a little better. I'm sure there was someone with an abacus that wasn't too happy about it. And then we got into Excel and computers. And we had humans that could now not have to have a fountain pen and a bottle of ink, but actually type their records in. Do you see this as the next boon of productivity? I mean, is this human plus machine at a whole other level?
I do. And I want to say it's both similar to some of the things you just referred to, and I think there's also one unique differentiator. So to put a little light onto some of that, because it also manifests itself quite often in conversations that you might be having. So I'll give the best one with my mom, who started asking me one day, "What is this chat thing? Do you know what this chat thing is about?" Referring to ChatGPT, of course. And and there's a lot of fear that happens around. And I said, "Listen, yeah, there's a little fear, and this is a big technology change, and humans are terrible with that. We just are not good with change. We get very, married to everything that's sitting out there." I said, "But you know what? There used to be people that were telephone operators way back in the day, and they would pick up the phone and say, 'Who do you want to talk to?' And they pull a wire and they connect to somebody else. That's if you don't know, is automated these days. Those people don't exist. But oddly enough, we employ more people today than we ever have in the history of mankind. So we kind of figure these things out. And I think AI is in that area, but there is one difference, and not just the telephone operator example, but a lot of things you just mentioned and these big technology advances. And if you think about people like to call this the fourth industrial revolution, where, yeah, we went from paper and pen to computer to client server, we'll call it. Then we went to internet and mobile and cloud, and now we're in this AI revolution. Those are all great big steps, but inference is the difference. So AI doesn't just automate things, and I think that's what you're talking about, all these fancy little bots and these things, but it actually is smart enough not just to automate, but to tell you what to automate. And that's just one small example. That's a little different. I don't know what effect that's going to have on things, but it is a fundamental shift in the technology that could create an exponential evolution and a ramp toward automation and all these other things we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I can't let you get past the telephone operator analogy without thinking of Lily Tomlin shouting one ringy dingy, two ringy dingy. And for any of our listeners that catch that, I appreciate it.
Yep.
Makes me feel like I have some peers out there. But yeah, it's changing all of our jobs. And, we talk a lot about jobs being lost, and there's no doubt some of the roles and some of the jobs will be lost. But the opportunity here, I want to kind of dive into this concept of intelligent agents, because frankly, if I could get someone to do my work while I'm sleeping or while I'm doing something else, are you kind of spelling out a future where an org chart of the future actually has virtualized agents that work for me, and I could have a team of 100 agents that, if I'm smart enough to figure out how to do it, are actually all working for me as a virtual team? I mean, is this kind of where we're going?
I think it's possible. I mean, we're not quite there yet. And then everybody needs to learn everything from the basic skill sets. Hey, go learn how to prompt properly. And then the new one that we're starting to see more and more now is I want to have a conversation with my data, which, by the way, sounds a little weird when you first start hearing it. And you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Like I can interrogate, and it's not just interrogation like is 10 times 10, 100. It's more than just that. It's, no, you're looking over here. I can understand your data and my ecosystem sitting around it, and I can start doing things with it. And I start going, oh, wow, like those are some interesting use cases that start to develop. And then you could, potentially start having what you're referring to. Are you going to have an army of them and they're going to do things for you? I guess that's possible. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no. I see the beginnings of some of these things, but I would like to see companies, even do the basics of automation before they go jump into some of this stuff, right? I mean, a lot of entities, a lot of big companies right now, they somewhat can talk a big game around, oh yeah, I'm going to automate everything, and I'm going to use AI to give me this big productivity boom, etc. And I'm like, really? You still use paper and pen though to do a PO or something like that. So can you start with something simple instead? No, you want to jump to this crazy use case over here. So I think we'll get there. And on top of that, listen, the technology still continues to evolve, and it needs to evolve a little bit further. It's a lot of still, I would say, somewhat science projects sitting out there that have a lot of promise, by the way.
Yeah, everybody wants to hit the home run, but I mean, I caught a couple things in your narrative there. I mean, you talked about understanding context or understanding data, having agents build or modify apps, this whole vibe code revolution. You talk about orchestrating workflows end to end. You talk about personalizing that for every user. You talked about, how you take a demo, make it very personal to the customer, take a sales call, activate and summarize all the notes. Ultimately, what's your point of view here? I mean, is this a capability that's going to be built as a add-on to the super apps, right? The ServiceNows, the Salesforces, the Microsoft, the Googles of the world. Is this a new opportunity for new entrants to build this kind of agentic capability? I don't know. How do you see this evolving for the customers out there? Like, should they be building this? Should they be looking for their vendor to build it? Like, what's your take on how this comes to market?
So I think it's going to be in all of the above, but let me give a little bit more specific answer around that. So let me go in a couple of phases. One, right now, I think you have this thing called what I like to call the LLM wars are occurring. Okay, you have OpenAI and Anthropic and Microsoft and all the big players and small players, and they're all creating those things. And if you haven't heard in the news, they're all spending billions and billions of dollars building data centers and these kinds of things. That'll eventually will work itself out, and I think we'll be left with a few vendors providing that capability, first of all, right? By the way, I think it's very much the same as what's happened in the hyperscaler space. We only really have, there's some edge-based hyperscalers and unique uses and such, but there's Google, Amazon, and Microsoft for the most part. But it took us a little while to get there. They had to do this big, huge capital investment. They got to a level where they differentiate amongst each other, and they move their market shares around, but it's pretty much, set these days. Well, I think the LLMs are going to do the same thing. That'll take, probably, 5 years or something like that. Who knows what that is. Then, once I think you do have that, I think it's going to be a mix of what you just said. Yes, companies like ServiceNow or Salesforce or Workday, some of the biggest SaaS vendors out there, we're clearly all out there taking a lot of this LLM technology, sometimes using our own proprietary versions. Quite often nowadays, we use a lot of the so-called public-based LLMs, and put a lot of intelligence on top of that to what I like to call curate our users' experience on these platforms and provide capability and more so outcomes instead of worrying about all the little gobbledygook of AI that's actually happening underneath the covers. And I think there's going to be a continuation of that, and that will be valuable. So the super app thing you like to talk about, I think that's going to be a fairly sizable piece of the market. But then I also think there's going to be two others. One, I'm a big bank, as an example. I have the R&D capabilities, and I believe it to be my differentiator against my competitors. And I'm going to buy or use one or many of these LLM platforms, and I'm going to code on top of those or create my own agents, create my own capabilities. And the big one that they're all going to want to do is access data. In the end, I think what you're going to see is data is going to be more important. I'm sure the Pure Storage guys love that. Data is going to be more important than the AI itself in certain ways. And so, that'll be pretty interesting. And then I think you'll have a bunch of spot little vendors that will figure out, hey, there's this little niche where I can create some expertise. Imagine what we do. How about we turn ourselves into SE super agents and you sell that? Okay, I don't know. Maybe that's a business that you and I should be looking at. But I think that's going to be the future that's sitting there. But there's a few things that have to occur for all of that to really come to fruition. Like I said, LLM war needs to kind of work itself out, because I think you're going to have too much choice at one point, and that won't make any sense for the market. And the cloud wars have proven that out, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can remember back when, I think it was Gartner who produced their Cloud Magic Quadrant back in, I don't know what it was, 2008, 2009, and you had like 30 or 35 players on that quadrant. And frankly, what do you have now in terms of hyperscalers? 5 or 6? There's only so much LLM of general corpus that you need. And I do agree with you. It actually doesn't make sense for many clients and most clients to create their own LLM. You're just going to use that as a framework. So that framework, that app store concept of this particular module for training or inference that's been created, I'm going to use that and I'm going to customize it as opposed to building it from scratch. I guess I'm interested in terms of when you think about these super assistants, what role do you think trust plays in this? Like if I'm going to start to automate my job and I'm not going to check every step, I'm just going to check the output.
Yeah.
How much of that do you think there's a human factor where maybe it's generational, but we just have to be comfortable that something else is going to do that job and it's not going to necessarily tell me everything it did in the process of performing it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point, and it comes up a lot, as and I see, very firsthand when I go and speak with customers. All right, here's a couple things I think that's going to happen there. One, we're early on, so guess what? The trust level's low, and especially when AI has come out the gate and said, "Hey, hallucinations are a thing. Our accuracy rate when we're really, really doing well is 65%." Uh-oh, do you think you're instilling a lot of trust when you do that? Okay, so you now have to have people who are looking at these things to say, okay, I have to have trust in at least that piece, and I'm willing to take the risk for a moment to say, I am willing to trade high levels of productivity and automation for inaccuracy. Or you can go the other route. I'm going to go really slow. I will not be productive, but I will get it exactly right. Now, think about the applications that, listen, when we're launching a rocket to the moon, guess what? I want it as accurate as possible. But when I'm trying to ship a pair of shoes somewhere, you know what? Occasionally we might not ship the right pair. It might not be the right size. It might not go to the right house. Did anybody get killed? No, you just probably had an upset customer. Guess what? If I go to a retailer that sells shoes, as an example, even without all this automation, I'm pretty sure they have that problem today. And so I think for a lot of companies, you're going to have to get into this evaluation of risk to the reward side of what these solutions and technologies can offer. And then I don't know, I'm an optimist, and I think that it's never going to be perfect. I don't ever see that. And you're never, and that's weird, by the way, in the concepts and context of the computer industry. Computers don't lie. Like one plus one always equals two. We never had to question that. Well, oddly enough, with these AI solutions, you have to question a little bit. So now you get into this trust but verify thing. I know for us, that's what we do. Anytime we offer up any kind of answer or recommendation or whatever it might be within our own software, there's a little thing that says up in the corner, hey, just to let you know, that's an AI-based answer that you're looking at. You should make sure you're comfortable with it. In other words, in the funny way, you know what? The last time I checked, humans don't typically have 6 fingers on their hands. So if the picture has 6 fingers, maybe there's a problem with this and I should go back to the drawing board.
Although, I'm sure there were folks early on who also didn't trust a calculator and had some math genius go and check that the 4-digit number multiplied by another 4-digit number actually came out. I remember in the early days of GPS, I think it was one of the major technology vendors had you actually navigate your car into a lake. There is a curve here in terms of evolution. But the fact is, what I'm hearing you say is, this agent-based workforce is coming, and it will drive productivity, and it will unlock value in data, assuming your data is ready to be unlocked. And that's a whole other discussion for a whole other episode. But the fact is, I think we're all sitting here going, you know what? I don't want to do a lot of this menial work either. I don't really want to go into Tableau, for instance, and build a bunch of dashboards and, twist them 17 different ways just to be able to get an answer. I'd love to be able to just ask my data, what is the answer? And you go figure it out. But at the end of the day, the concept is, potentially if I'm an executive, I'm thinking, well, what if my workforce was overly reliant on this? What if they kind of became a little too complacent in terms of checking whether the work was there? Where did the answers come from? Is there legal or ethical risks? And then what does it do to the training and development of my people? So maybe in your experience and, when you're talking to CIOs and CXOs, what's the biggest risk you think they're not paying attention to in this race? And, as you're going down this, what's the biggest opportunity that they're excited about?
I think they both come in the same sentence or same comment maybe here. The risk and the opportunity is doing nothing, right? You get a little bit of this, okay, I got FOMO. Everybody's doing it. I should be doing it. But okay, now we're going to sit and analyze it for the next 6 months. And I don't get started and I don't see any value proposition. And then I'm just kind of lost to where it is to go. Here's one of the best things about what's happening, I think, in we'll call it the AI world here today. The barrier to entry, if you want to at least start with playing around with it, is quite low. Meaning, like an example here at ServiceNow, we have an enterprise license to an LLM vendor. Pick one of the big top ones is who we're using. I won't go into who it is. And we'll call it relatively low cost, or never mind that. I also have my $20 version of the one I really loved before. I just got a corporate one now. Well, okay, so let's call it $20, I can take, some data. Okay, let's be careful with privacy and all these kinds of things. But I can take some data, I can load it in there, and I can have that conversation like I mentioned before, and I can start doing things with that right now. And once you get comfortable with that way that you do that verbalized style, natural language prompting with it, you realize, okay, there's some real power sitting in there and I can do it really quickly. And now with the ability to create a custom GPT or what's called a project over Anthropic, or, the vendors have these kinds of things now, I can pick those up and move them around really easily and offer them out to my friends as an example, or my coworkers, or whoever might want to use these things. And so trying to get started at that more like what I would call the departmental level is pretty easy. And so get into that before you attempt someone else. Oh, I have to have miles and miles of governance on it. We have to create a committee. Yeah, okay, go start doing that. But we're not there yet. So start doing some small things instead of boiling the ocean type things. And I think that can get people going. It'll get the trust factor up. It'll get the comfort factor up that, like, wow, there's some real things in here I can start doing. And you might then stumble into the like, oh, wait, I found a big problem to solve. And this stuff, AI, can actually do some of it. Maybe I do need the governance. I do need the committee. And let's go do a big enterprise-based rollout for it. So I see that as the path for a lot of these things.
I like that. Good old-fashioned bootstrapping in the garage.
That's it. I'm a start from the bottom guy. Bottoms up always for me.
So look, this is absolutely a huge shift in the way we work, the way we think about work, the way we think about even, what is considered to be productivity. And I don't think any of us want to work more. I think we all just want to get more work done. And also find a way to live our lives in the process. Let's think a little out to the future as we round this out. So let's travel to 2030. Not that long from now. 4 years if you're thinking about 2026. Where do you think this is at? How fast is this going? And if you're right, what's one thing about the way we work today that's going to seem absolutely crazy or old-fashioned in hindsight?
So I'll do two things, Jared, because it's pretty hard to predict the future. And the perspective I'll use around that is the fact that if you asked me 3 years ago, would any of the stuff that we just talked about be in our world? Would my mom be asking me about, ChatGPT? No, it didn't. So wow, did things change fast? So I do want to use that as a guidepost to I don't think anybody really can predict the future here. But knowing what I know and where things are right now, I'll go with two things. One, I think a lot of the AI capabilities and the stuff that we know about today, and you start to see where some of the future is heading, it'll become so ubiquitous, like the way the cloud is today. Think of your phone that has a set of apps. You run them, your data's not there, it's in the cloud and this and that. And I love using my reference of my mom, who, by the way, does not have a cell phone. So I'm joking, actually, when I say this. Let's assume she does. But she doesn't have to worry about those things. She just gets what she needs and it's all there. Whereas you and I being in the technical world 15, 20 years ago, that would have been unfathomable to us. And how did we get here? And we'd have to go through all this detail and all these things. It just, you don't care anymore. I want a consumer grade experience, even that terminology, consumer grade experience in the work. Where did that come from? Well, they made it so easy and ubiquitous with mobile phones and the internet and the cloud and all these things that come with it. So I do believe that it'll just kind of fade to the background and you just won't see it anymore. Now, so one thing as an example that we do today, it's a very small thing that I think will go away, so to speak, with the proliferation of quite a few of these AI capabilities. That's dashboards is a good one. You think about it today, even ServiceNow, we have tons of dashboards. We're riddled with dashboards, and every other major software company has them, and everybody talks about it. I'm going to create the CEO dashboard, one place for you to go where your business is running, or nirvana, right? I think that'll eventually just go away, and I'll have the ability through an LLM and just natural language and have access to enterprise-wide based data. I can just, while I'm driving into the office, if we even still do that 4 years from now, probably most people don't even do it today, I can just start talking into something and say, hey, I'm looking for this, tell me about that. And next thing you know, whether it's a visual dashboard, a signal, a something comes up for you, and you don't need an IT person anymore to go do that. Natural language to do that. I see some of that already today, and I only see that getting better. And I think dashboards, a very boring thing anyway, will eventually just go away.
Yeah, it's amazing to have that at your fingertips. I think what I heard you say was, we'll know we're in the mainstream of AI when we stop talking about AI, when it's just there. We don't talk about internet anymore. We don't talk about e-business anymore. No. They're still there. They're bigger than they ever were. They're just part of our lives. We don't focus on them. Look, Jeff, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking us behind the scenes on how copilots have changed work. They're not just slideware. I think we talked about just 2, 3, 4, 5 years out. For all those listening, the takeaway is simple. The future isn't just apps with AI bolted on. It's AI as the app. It's AI integrated in the app. And a lot of this becomes the operating system for your work and your life. And this agent era is here. The question is whether you'll let it happen to you, or you'll design it into your applications and get the productivity boost out of it. Jeff, anything you want to leave our folks with before we sign off here?
It'll sound cliche for sure, but like Nike maybe used to say, I don't even know what they say anymore, but just go do it. Just try this stuff. I'm sure, Shawn, you, like me, you're the tech guy for your family. So holidays are coming up, and they're all going to ask you to fix my phone, fix my printer, and those kinds of things. And then eventually, I'm sure you have that cousin or uncle or aunt that's like, hey, my neighbor's son or daughter is thinking of going into XYZ at college or university. What do you suggest? I'm worried, I hear all these things, jobs are going to go away. What do you think you should do? And I'm like, wow, I didn't know I was that much of an expert, but fine. Let's try to answer that question. One thing I tell people is, like, listen, I can't predict the future with this stuff. I don't know what jobs are going to make it, what isn't. I probably have a few of them I know that probably won't make it. But the more important skill set is prompt engineering. Learning to get comfortable in talking in this way and extracting data and thinking things through, I believe will definitely be the skill set of the future. So go and just prompt engineering and do it.
So prompt engineering is the HB engineering calculator instructions of the year 2026. Get to know it, even though it seems backwards. Look, if you've enjoyed this conversation, I'd invite our audience to make sure you subscribe. Don't miss an episode of Beyond the IT Headlines. And if you're hungry for more data, check out thedatawire.com. With that, I'm Shawn Rosemarin with Jeff Margolese. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.